today we're going to talk about 3 differences between living in the US and living in Mexico specific to the house. And number 1 is going to be the plumbing, specifically how you get water. So of course, everyone knows that you do not drink water out of the tap here in Mexico. And some of those reasons really have nothing to do with the water source, so much as how the water gets treated from the water source in your home. So 1, very similar to the US, people tend to get their tap water from either the city water or they use well water. But unlike the US, water is not constantly being delivered to your home. And so you will have at least 1, if not 2 tanks in your home to make sure that you've got the water that you need. Now, most homes in Mexico have what's called a cisterna. It is a pretty big underground tank that gets filled with city water. Again, it's not constantly being filled, but when you get city water, it's generally going directly to your cisterna. And if you've ever opened a toilet tank in the US, you'll see the float valve. I believe all cisternas also have the same valve so that when the bulb gets to a certain point, they will know that your cisterna is full, they will shut off the water and move on to the next cisterna. And from what I understand, it's literally like a sequential thing where each city, each barrio, each neighborhood has a schedule for when they will normally get water delivered to them. It's probably not every day. It might be once or twice a week. Some places get it more frequently than others. But either way, your house essentially has certain times of the week where it's likely to get water delivered to the cisterna. It's not something you have to do anything about. It should happen automatically if everything is working properly. And then when that float gets to the top, then the water will stop going into your cisterna. Now, this is where different houses are configured a little bit differently, but the way I understand it, if you have a tinaco, which is a water tank on the roof of your house, then you'll have a water pump between the 2 things. Between the cisterna and the tinaco, you'll have a water pump, which may or may not always be on, but for sure, you'll want to turn it on in order to pump the water from the cisterna to the tinaco. Now, I've never actually seen the inside of a tinaco, but I believe similar to the cisterna, it also has a float valve so that when it's full, it will then tell the pump to go ahead and stop pumping, as well as in the cisterna, there should be a sensor that lets the water pump know, hey, there's no water here, so you should also turn off. And then from the tinaco, which is on the rooftop, some homes literally just use gravity to get the water into your various, sinks, toilet, showers, etc. Whereas other homes have an additional pump that will actively send water to those locations. But to my knowledge, usually it's a gravity system, meaning if you run out of electricity, you should also be able to use the tinaco gravity to get water until the tinaco runs dry. Now, something you'll notice about the cisterna, and I believe it's equally true of the tinaco, is they're not necessarily perfectly sealed. And so these are both high places where, dust, dirt, germs, bacteria, etc. could get into the water system. And so, yeah, even if the water going to the cisterna and your tinaco is perfectly drinkable, probably don't recommend drinking it just because the cisterna and tinaco tend not to be fully sealed. There could be issues with the water from that, as well as, of course, the plumbing going through the actual home. It is not common for houses to have a filtration system, but of course, those houses do exist. It could be a situation where the water coming into your home is perfectly fine, and there's a filter system within your home. The 2 combined probably do lead to a system where you can drink the water, but that is not common throughout Mexico. Home filtration systems still need to be maintained, and so to me, better safe than sorry, and just don't drink the water anyway. Fun fact for the cisterna, which is often called a well, you'll notice that some homes actually lock up their cisternas because 1, you wouldn't want your child to be playing near the well and fall in. Again, most cisternas, I believe, have a cover on them, but it's easy to open and close, so you wouldn't want a situation where it's open, a child falls in. Yeah, that would be pretty bad. And the cisterna is a place where people might hide things. So this is a little bit dark, but I've absolutely noticed that when there's a missing person reported, one of the places Mexicans look at is the cisterna to see if a body has been hidden there. Very depressing idea, but nevertheless, keep the cisterna locked. Fun fact about the Tinaco, and I especially noticed this in Merida where it's super hot, is when it's hot outside, the water is now hot because the Tinacos are literally on your roof just soaking in all the amazing Merida weather. In Merida, for example, my shower was connected to a hot water source, but my sinks were not, which wasn't a huge deal because Merida is hot. I was okay with cold water. But the best time to wash dishes in Merida is during the day because quite frankly, the water in the Tinaco gets hot, and therefore the water I can use to wash my dishes are also hot. That being said, again, having a tank where the water can change temperature based on the weather is ultimately material that's not fully protecting the water and therefore is not water that I would ever drink. Here in San Cris, it's a lot cooler and so I don't notice that. However, also here, both of my sinks as well as my shower is connected to a hot water source, and so I have hot water whenever I need it. However, it's not necessarily customary for sink water to be attached to any type of boiler system. So in Merida, a lot of homes did not have any kind of a water heater. They just used the sun to warm up the Tinaco, which therefore produced warmer water for your shower. Whereas here in San Cris, hopefully you have either a water boiler or a solar water heater, because cold water here is cold water and you might not want to shower in it. And speaking of water heaters, most homes, especially here in San Cris, will have some way of heating the water. You will have either a water boiler, or on the rooftop, you will have a solar water heater so that you can have a warm shower. Now, I do not have a washer or dryer here, but people who do have a washer or dryer, I'm noticing, have to be much more careful with how they use their water because often their washing machine will take up so much water where they won't have any water left to wash dishes, take a shower, or flush the toilet. People who have a washer in their home, they tend to know their water delivery schedule because they will make sure that they're doing laundry while water is being delivered to their cisterna to avoid running out of water until the next delivery day. For myself, even if I had a washer, high chance I would still use the lavanderia because, yeah, who likes to do laundry? That being said, especially if you don't know the water delivery schedule or if you just have a lot of laundry to do and you run out of water, the last method people use to get water into their homes is to call a Pipa, and they will come to your house with a water truck and deliver water directly into your cisterna. Again, this would be a great time if you have one to turn on your pump to make sure your Tinaco also gets filled. I'm told that getting water from a Pipa generally costs 300 pesos for the entire delivery. I'm not sure if this is necessarily for homes with a Tinaco and a cisterna, or if it's just to fill however much an average cisterna tends to use. But either way, it is considered much more expensive than just using city water. Now, this is something in my current home and in my previous I've really never had to worry about because my host has always handled all of these things seamlessly without issue. But something I heard a couple of long residents here in San Cris mention, as foreigners, we are famous for being really, really needy, right? Some of us will freak out if we lose power. Some of us will freak out if we lose water. We'll freak out if like we consider electricity, water, gas, internet to be kind of mandatory 24-hour concepts. Here in San Cris and in parts of Mexico, these are not things that the average Mexican would have 24/7. And so I have heard of certain barrios that run out of water for much longer periods of time. And one of the ways to call out your wealth is if you have Pipa deliveries frequently. I know of some long-term residents here in San Cris who have gone weeks without water because they refused to pay for water delivery to their home. They did not want to stand out amongst their neighbors as being overly wealthy or overly needy. They kind of felt they would be targeted for this type of behavior. So just something to keep in mind. I am not saying do not order water when you need it, so much as our dependency on tap water is not quite as relatable to a local here in San Cris. Random info, do with that what you will. The next thing that's different here in Mexico as opposed to the US is the house gas is not piped in. In the US, generally speaking, your house has a pipe coming from whatever gas source you use, and 24/7 you have access to essentially the city gas, and you're billed for however much you use. Here in Mexico, we use propane gas as opposed to natural gas, delivered in liquid form in a tank. So your general options are to either have a gigantic tank. Mine is on my roof, although in some homes they have it on ground level. This tank of course has a meter on it, and so when it gets low, you can call and have a gas truck come and deliver additional gas, or you might get a cylinder of gas delivered to your home. So when I lived in Merida, I had one cylinder, and that cylinder was only used for my stove/oven. It was not used to heat my water. I had a solar water heater specifically for my shower, and so my gas tank was only used for my stove. Here, I'm actually not 100% sure what I use because of course I have gas for my stove. I do not have an oven here, but I have both a gas water heater and a solar panel, and I'm not 100% sure what gets used where, but either way, my water is always warm and I've never run out of gas to cook. Other houses, however, may use only a cylinder tank for both their cooking and their showers. That being said, in Merida, because my gas tank only dealt with my stove, I really only had to replace that every 6 months or so. Here I've noticed friends who use the cylinder tanks for both their water and their cooking often have to replace them about every month, which costs a little more than 700 pesos for a large tank. To avoid an issue of running out, some people always have 2 tanks on hand, one tank connected to everything and another tank as standby. Fun fact about having gas stoves is a lot of places have a gas stove and a gas oven, but they do not attach it to electricity. And so when it comes to lighting your stove or lighting the oven, you're gonna wanna have a lighter because there's no clicking to light the stove or the oven. You instead have to have a separate lighter. Again, this is not in all homes, but in quite a few. And the third thing you're gonna have to get used to in Mexico is oftentimes there are no outside trash cans. So we all know that having a trash can outside is awesome because it keeps the animals out of your trash. But if you have a perfect trash can, apparently there's a high chance that your trash can will get stolen. And so instead, a lot of people will opt to not have a trash can at all, or will purposely damage their own trash can so that it has a huge crack at the bottom, small enough to where a dog or other animal really can't get inside of it, but large enough to where nobody will bother to steal it. Now, when I lived in Merida, I would take my trash right in front of my house on the sidewalk, and that's where the garbage guy came to pick it up, and all of the houses near me had a similar spot on their sidewalk. Here in San Cris, I've noticed that there are communal spots. And so I never put my trash out in front of my house. I always have to walk it a little further away to kind of the communal sidewalk trash spot because trash pickup is only on certain roads at certain times. That being said, there are people who have trash cans within their gated property. Then they haul the trash can out to the communal trash area and then they dump it and take it back home. I mean, if you don't have that much trash, I think it's easy enough to grab your bag and haul it over there. Homes in Mexico tend not to have smoke alarms or carbon monoxide alarms. So keep that in mind. I will state that I'm actually really happy not to have a smoke alarm. Why am I glad to not have a smoke alarm?
Burnt onions, burnt tortillas, burnt more tortillas.
I burn a lot of things here.
Mostly tortillas.
Maybe it will pass by, someone save me. For I pass out, I'm too lonely to be done, I'ma drink at this page. Yeah.